Good. So I guess we'll start. Welcome everybody to tonight's lecture. I think we're super happy to have Jan Boelen today with us for the lecture talking about Atelier LUMA, which he will explain in depth. Just to give a bit of context, the lecture is part of the ongoing lecture series of the module that we're hosting this year called Critical Architectural Practice, where we try to address broader planetary issues as regards to or as relates to architecture as a profession and us as practicing architects as such, but also to investigate in multiple ways relationships or our relationships to nature, culture, and our collective future. So without saying too much further on, I would now give the word to Tina, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Jakob. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jan.
Hello.
Welcome to TU Wien online teaching. So it's a big pleasure to have Jan today with us. We're really looking forward to the presentation and further discussion, as we thought that Jan Boelen, a curator of design and architecture and contemporary art, is one of the key protagonists who is actually putting forward the criticality of design and questioning of the role of design and architecture in today's realm, in today's crisis, or the issues in which our planet is. He's currently also the rector at the Karlsruhe University of Art and Design, and of course, artistic director of Atelier LUMA, which he will go into the depth with his presentation. What is interesting is that Jan was founder and former director of the gallery, the design and research gallery Z33 for contemporary art in Hasselt, Belgium. But of course, he also initiated Manifesta in 2012, and I think around 2012 he started a new trajectories, and he challenged the course of many design biennials within Europe and maybe also beyond, because he somehow proposed the shift of this direction, not to showcase the product of design, but actually that design biennials started to become the platforms for design research. That was really an extraordinary moment. That first he was critical about the biennials in 2012, and then he curated the Bio 50, so the 24th biennial in Ljubljana, where we were lucky to collaborate and to be part of this transition. And I think further from 2014, also other biennials that Jan curated, like the one in Istanbul in 2018, but also others that he didn't somehow continue this path of biennial to really be the place to question things, to put new directions, and to somehow continue this design research attitude that he somehow advocated for. Just to somehow conclude, recently he was extremely active in the Venice Architectural Biennial, and he curated the Lithuanian pavilion, Planet of People. And last year there was an important book which came out. He co-edited Social Matter, Social Design. For good or bad, all design is social. Where actually I think it's extremely important, where this interaction with the social world by emphasis on the role of materiality is placed in foreground. So this is just some of the works or intentions that Jan has been part in the recent years. And we are really looking forward to hear your thoughts behind establishing Atelier LUMA of the past and the future. So Jan, here is your word. Welcome.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Jakob. Yeah, it is happy seeing back, because indeed we worked together. And in fact, what I'm going to tell today or tonight is in fact something that started in that biennial in Ljubljana. Something I not always tell, but after that biennial, which was a biennial that was dealing with approximately 11 contemporary topics that were executed by 11 multidisciplinary teams that researched contemporary issues and urgencies. And we placed it all over Slovenia. This biennial became a model where the LUMA Foundation came to have a conversation to see what could be possible in the south of France. And this is the bridge from the biennial indeed as a platform for production and questioning to maybe a much more pragmatic attitude and how we can use critical practices in order to be constructive and then also create alternatives. Atelier LUMA is situated in the south of France, in Arles. It's part of an old post-industrial site of the Railway Company of France, and LUMA itself is part of an initiative of Maya Hoffmann, which is who is based in Switzerland, and there the LUMA Foundation is also based. She is one of the heirs of the company Roche, pharmaceutical company. As many multi-billionaires, she also has an art collection, like many more. And on that site, and I go back, there is this year, there is also like a building that opened of Frank Gehry, a 10-level high building that was conceived in 2006 and opened, in fact, in this year in 2021. This also says something about not only how the world changed and how we look to these kind of buildings now, but also I would say, I'm not an architect, I'm a designer from education, how slow architecture is, and that every Cedric Price would say every building is a prediction and every prediction is wrong. At this moment, and you can go to the LUMA Arles website, and there you will see the whole building and everything that is around. The LUMA is this whole site, and in one of these buildings, Atelier LUMA is situated since 2016. Step by step, the whole site was renovated, and the whole site opened in 2021 in June this year, June this year, and not fully yet, because the new about that, especially today, a bit more about architecture and the architecture side of Atelier LUMA. You see us, a messy space in an exhibition space where we are having a kind of lab, a lab that is completely open without no walls between the different groups of people where we are developing materials. Atelier LUMA is interested in research and design and is developing sustainable circular materials that relate to that region. The region that is quite specific, and I will explain that later more. Thing is made that it can adapt, can it moved out, that it's adaptable. It's a kind of mechano that is there. And this is the region. The region is not only a site with a tower. The region goes to the Mediterranean and a river that comes from Switzerland, the Rhone. And so we are situated in a delta where the Camargue is based. The Camargue, which is a very interesting nature park, and maybe it's known for some of you for the flamingos that are there. For others, probably the bulls and the gypsies that are there. But it's a wetland where biodiversity is crucial, and this wetland is the place that continuously need to be maintained because it's a man-made landscape that needs continuously intervention of man in order to conserve. So nature conservation is maintenance, and it's most of the time in man-made landscapes. There are no so-called natural environments. There are ecosystems that we can maintain and where we can keep biodiversity going. That's what Atelier LUMA tries to do. We invite designers. They come for a short period, 2 or 3 days. They look around and they check what is possible, and they look what kind of partnerships that can be built. Here you see Studio Klarenbeek and Dros, Dutch duo. Many Dutch people, not only because I'm myself of the north, but this landscape is related to the Dutch landscape. In fact, it's a landscape that is with a lot of irrigation canals, quite under sea level certain parts. And here they are finding algae. Algae that we didn't see, that also the people that lived there did really not took an account, and they work with that in order to make biomaterials out of them. Biomaterials, bioplastics, I should say biopolymers that we use to for all kind of applications. I will go into that later in detail. Or we look into sunflowers. A part of that site is, of course, climatized with solar power. But in the winter, at this moment, or in fact, more January, February, we need some oil biofuel to heat the buildings, climatize the buildings. And then we use sunflower as oil. But then still there is still a part left over, and we look how we can use that and see what can be done with that. If you have sunflower, the inside is like a foam material, and that foam material itself can be pressed into all kind of acoustic panels or other applications. You can think about transport material and so on. What we try to do is to find another relation to nature. These plants are growing super fast. Algae are growing in 3 weeks and are consuming enormous amounts of CO2. And we make materials that are there for a couple of years and then can be composted and are biodegradable. Here you have a foam material that can be functioning as an acoustic material, and that material itself is very is quite sustainable and can stay in architecture for years. And then the building can be deconstructed, or the interior can be changed with replacing the material. I'm not going to show everything or explain everything. We look into what we can find, the minerals around in the region, and what we can make out of that, what we can dye with that, and that can be textiles, that can be the plastics itself, the polymers or other materials. We, like I indicated before, I'm interested also in modularity and how this can become a system over the whole site for the whole LUMA Foundation, not only for Atelier LUMA, and becomes an ecosystem in itself. But yeah, I also want to show this, these sheep, because they represent a certain reality that we forget. Sheep or at least wool. Wool and merino d'Arles is a very good wool kind, but due to the fact that import out of Australia and New Zealand is there, these sheep are not delivering any more wool for 30, 40 years anymore. They are there for meat and milk, not for wool. And we are looking to this waste material. The wool of these sheep, which was once the highest quality and seen as the best of France, is now seen as a material that is discarded. And we are setting up these value chains again and trying to see how we can build new industries, new economies around it. This is what we do with what we did, in fact, with Studio Martino Gamper. And I'll show you one project in short. So here we are felting it. We colored it, of course, as you could imagine. Here you see it. The quality is not so high anymore because due to the cultivation for meat and milk, the wool quality degraded. So we cannot do anything, not all with it anymore. Here we are making the insides of coaches and sofas with rice straw, another material that is abundant in the Camargue. And that is a very good filling for seeds. Here we are looking to olives. We are in the south, so the leftover of the cakes, the pressing of the oil of olives, and we make extrusion profiles out of it. We mix it with minerals, and that become profiles that finally become products in itself. And that end up in an interior, and that is fully sourced by Atelier LUMA. The black walls are mussels from the restaurants. Here you see the felted wool, the profiles on the chairs, and this using the local rebar metal, which there is a big producer. Even the textiles for the in front of the windows we made with Japanese knotweed, an invasive species. Another product that just won the Swiss Design Award that we developed is a product that is not only good for paving, for parks, public parks and so on, and leaving water through, is kind of developed by a Swiss collective. But what is good about it is that it can leave the water through, so it can go into the soil, but also reduces enormously the temperature in cities. So by bringing in more these kind of pavements in cities, and in parks, we can reduce heat by 5 to 6 degrees and create microclimates. And this is something we are interested in, to work together with architects, how this can become not just a product, but a service where we help people to design together their environments with these algorithmic patterns, and also bringing the right blends in and the environment, so that we can create microclimates in cities where that water and heat are welcomed in a different way than today in mineral environments. You see a bit the side. Here you see an application. We are also interested in how claddings and build the most abundant materials around the world, and it's discarded, it's not used. In fact, it's used for salt on the roads in the winter and for a bit for eating, but it's very cheap. And here we started to use it as a material for claddings of walls, which reduces the flame retardant of the whole building, makes the building also antibacterial, and it's just by crystallization, by using wind and sun, that these panels are coming out. Here you see the first tryouts, where we go into the salt fields of the Camargue, where we start producing these panels, where just is crystallized, and where they finally then end up against the wall. We use it also to fill concrete and concrete claddings. I'm not against concrete. At this moment, there is a hype of wood. I'm quite careful about that. Trees need 30, 40 years to grow. And if we start cutting like crazy, like what is happening now, all the trees, in order to sell them and use them in buildings, we lose 30, 40 years in CO2 absorption. So we have to be very careful. Concrete can be sourced also in very good circumstances, not in the way it's done today. So we have to go for green concrete and good production methods there. If I talk about sunflower, and I will show you more applications, it's in fact about changing the value chains and the connections in the landscape. So here we brought in new machines for the farmers in order to cut these sunflowers differently. And this is the way they can store now the stem of the sunflower. And with that, in the winter, like this season, they are working on the material. So they get a seasonality. We bring different machines in, we build a cooperative, and over the winter, we develop a second income stream for the farmers. And with this cooperative, we ask them to not use pesticide and insecticide and to try to be as sustainable as possible. And they can do that now because they have a second income stream and are not just dependent on one income when they cut off the sunflower. You see an application as a kind of wallpaper, an acoustic wallpaper, that all the materials have certificates. Our building industry is preventing new materials coming in, so we had to develop for 2-3 years all kind of tests and certificates in order to apply all the norms and standards that are there. In Atelier LUMA, we try to question these norms and the standards, but it's very difficult to change the legal systems itself, and we try to do that by design and through design. Here you see where we are sourcing natural fibers and colors to make big carpets, wool, also dyeing it naturally. This is what we did for Artec. Artec is a Finnish Swiss company where we developed this old Alver Alto series, and where we developed the coverings and the insides of the seeds. You see algae that are like a biomass that we inject mold into tiles, mosaic tiles that we can deliver in many colors, also with all the certificates, and that become then a kind of mosaic tile, in this case in toilets. And toilets where no daylight come in. That is quite important because these biopolymers are not functioning with UV light. So we bring them in dark spaces of the building. These are new materials and they cannot be applied everywhere. So you cannot just say this is a bioplastic. We need to say this is the biopolymer that can only be used in these kind of circumstances. So I showed you some of the projects we are doing, but the big project that we did the last year that opened this summer. And one of the things that we are working on right now is a project we developed with Assemble and BC architects. A project that is renovating the last building in itself on the site. It's a building that is 3 times as big as Atelier LUMA. It's 4,500 square meters. And we do that with Assemble, British architecture collective, and BC architects from Belgium that is working with mainly materials and thinking how the roles of architects can change and shift. And together with Assemble, who is also interested in social collaborative practices, and together with Atelier LUMA, we developed this building. The biggest decision was that the 1/3 of the building we are not going to use. We are doing nothing. We just put a roof on. We don't even put windows in. We leave it as it is in itself. And the other side, we built workshops and labs and studios. We use the building as a quarry. The building itself is our source, our quarry, where we build the building with. And we do that and do tests to make the plasters, the bricks, the soils, everything that is in. We get also leftover materials from the quarries out of the region, which are quite numerous. And with that, here you see the prototype, the mock-up. We started to make walls out of rammed earth. You see a render. This is how the inside will be. A floor with leftovers of the roof tiles of the parts of the daylight to the of the roof windows. Here the bricks that we make. Here will be sunflower as an acoustic material in between. We set up educational courses because we don't want that this knowledge is just for us there. This knowledge need to be shared with the environment. We want to train contractors, architecture students, and every year in May, also next year in May, end of May, we set up courses to learn these techniques. If I'm talking about the workshops, that is developed about over this long space here. It's a wooden structure where the other one was a rammed earth structure. And here everything is climatized or will be isolated with rice straw. The buildings are not climatized, they are just isolated. We painted with the algae. We use the building not only as a quarry, but also as a testing place. So here you could imagine a curtain that is testing colors. So the building is a testing place for ourselves, also this paint and other applications, but also the building as a kind of educational tool for visitors. This is how we want to connect the region with that site and try to develop a new economy around that, an economy that is more diverse and locally based, because we believe that materials are heavy and people and ideas are light. Therefore, this idea, we are not interested in exporting these materials. We are at this moment working in, for instance, in the Middle East, in China. We are working at this moment in Egypt, in the Champagne region in France and the Cognac region in France, where we are developing projects, regional projects, where we share our knowledge in order to set up new kind of Atelier LUMAs, new kind, I said, because everywhere it changes a little bit, and where we are able to develop new economies, ecologies, ecosystems with the partners that are there. Voila, this is a little bit what Atelier LUMA is doing, very short. I see, I thought it would have taught longer, but here I am. So we have more time for questions. I'm happy to dive deeper into certain aspects of the presentation.
Thank you, Jan, so much for your presentation. I think there are so many questions opening up. I have a couple of them, but I would like to maybe ask first, please, anyone, if you could turn the cameras on and maybe propose a question, if there is anyone who would like to start. Otherwise, we would be starting with Jakob, but we would be extremely grateful if discussion would be started by you students, because you should be the ones to carry any of this criticality and pragmatism we heard about into the foreground. So anyone daring to pose a question, it can be very simple or challenging.
I would have a question if I may start.
Sure.
And my question would be if because you said that you are like opening new studios around the world or similar ones, if there you use like other materials then for making product, and what kind would they be? Because you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and what would be the difference? Or
it's not Saudi Arabia, it's the Emirates, but okay, it's
sorry.
no, it's a detail, because in fact it's the question is correct. We are not exporting the materials, so in that region we are looking to, for instance, palm, the palm trees, and they're very interesting fibers, and of course we have some knowledge about fibers. That is what we have, and we have knowledge about weaving techniques and technologies and so on. So, and we know a little bit about dyeing and how you can dye with minerals. You see, suddenly things come together. So behind Atelier LUMA, and I didn't tell that, is a resource center that we are building, where Jakob also was on the basis of, is a kind of system where we map and document the whole research that we are doing. And this, and also like very intuitive, like WhatsApp messages, all things are tagged there and get into kind of cloud and constellation of knowledge. So you have a material layer and a digital layer that is on top of each other. And with that, in fact, our partners in wherever they are can start also working with. So what we are doing is not, what I often say, is not rocket science. It's also not, this knowledge is out there. I mean, it is ages old. It's just like that we combine it with new technologies and with new principles. It's in fact Atelier LUMA and these kind of places are kitchens where you cook the materials, you mix them, you cook them, you dye them, you let them dry, and you bring them together and in different ways. And then you have something new that can last for a certain time. So these are principles that you can apply everywhere in the world. So we are more interested in exchanging these principles, exchanging these ways of working, but more important is a way of looking to the landscape. And there are architects and designers, an important reference is Learning from Las Vegas, probably you know. And this kind of naive observing of a landscape and trying to observe really deeply what is going on. Where are the things coming from? What are the streams? What are the flows? And trying to see not only a material and the principle of a material, but connect it also with the flows that are there. So this is something where you, if we go to another environment, we try to build a local team that is there, that is based there, but that is connected with us as Atelier LUMA and is connected with that resource center. So again, not exporting the materials, but the people and the ideas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question.
I have another question, or like, have you experienced, so like we saw a lot of materials, have you experienced some kind of mycelium installation already, like fungi installation?
Yeah. We did, we are doing quite a lot of research on mycelium. But what we are interested in is, what is the problem with mycelium? There is also a problem with it. We also have to acknowledge that there is one company which is standardizing mycelium over the world now. They are really sending, you can just order mycelium and it's a standardized, normalized product. A package, a plastic bag with the strains in, and that you cultivate for a couple of weeks and then you have it what you want. Yeah, we are not interested in that. That's not interesting. Yeah.
Okay, but
we are working with mycelium in a way that you look to local waste streams and look to the local strains that are out there, and you try to combine them. It will be almost impossible to do that in the Middle East because of climate change, for instance. Yeah, so you do that in other more probably like places like Vienna. It's more humid, or Slovenia, it's more humid. There you can start looking into waste streams and to strains of mycelium fungi that are able to glue them together in an interesting way. Yeah. We're making also acoustic panels with it. We are also interested in dyeing them with algae, looking how they can smell. What can you do with waste of kitchens? How they can become kitchen material, in fact. So these are very small circles that can be very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Matthias, Paula, maybe? No? Okay. There are a couple of questions. I'm extremely interested in what you mentioned before, that you would like, that you are questioning the standards and the norms, no, of all these newly produced materials. I was wondering, because it was quite impressive, that how did you manage to put, due to all the standards in terms of fire protection, and you mentioned the salt panels, Was this process really going on when you were actually building this LUMA building in its own? Because what is interesting is, of course, you are not exporting these products, but if they are certified, do they need to be certified in another location again?
Yeah, they need to, because they are, that is how that countries are protecting their markets. Yeah, but once you have one, you easily can refer to another one. And in Europe, it's going a little bit easier, but internationally, you have to indeed. Yeah. First, it starts with questioning the categorization. Questioning the categorization. If we talk about salt or algae, for instance, algae are a material that are seaweeds, that are a material that is seen as a seaweed, a material that is not really productive or economically interesting. So what happened is that no research by universities was done on it. And if you look back into history, mainly women did research on algae, for instance. Very curious, because women had to take it out of the water, had to clean the ponds. It was seen as an unproductive material, one that costed. So this material, where also a lot of stories and myths are connected to, is very interesting. But as I said, not much research is done about it. There are more than 100,000 species, but we try to build libraries, because there are each time new kind of species that are coming out, new combinations that can be found everywhere around the world. We just came back from Venice with a team of 4 people, because we are interested in the algae that are there in the laguna, and we want to build a project around that, maybe in a couple of years. So we are mapping it, and we are mapped it in London to see what was there, and we will go on mapping it in London. So because we believe that these kind of libraries of algae are quite interesting. If you look to salt, and maybe one of you knows someone, but I don't, and we don't, we are now doing for a couple of years research on salt. And salt is a very interesting material. You can make batteries out of it, for instance. You can make energy out of it. But it is not, there are no research groups around the world that are dealing with salt, because it's seen as economically not viable. But if I say something about lithium, and you Google lithium research groups, you will find several universities that are dealing with it, and with batteries that are dealing with it. So it's so the normalization and the standards starts, in fact, already before. It starts with what we research. And in fact, what we need to do is we need to find things. They are there, the algae are there, they are abundant, the salt is there. And so we can do something with that. But we have to leave our traditional economical, cultural perspectives on these materials in order to understand that maybe other things are possible. And that's the big shift, and that's the first shift that needs to happen. The second shift is then indeed the legal shift. For instance, if I go back to this resource center, we don't try to categorize our research. The algae are next to the mycelium, and they literally infect each other. To go back to that, they pollinate each other, and with that we are a dirty laboratory. A scientist, although we have scientists working in the atelier, but they have to accept that we do this cross pollination of projects within. So we are not interested in purely getting specialized and getting very deep, but try to build new connections between history, culture, economy, knowledge, and so on, in order to break certain traditional boundaries in society. The last one is, of course, the most difficult one, the one of the legal structures that are there. And that is only by coming up with deep with alternatives in itself. Yeah, it's hard work. And also don't know if all the products or the things that we are developing are viable, economically viable, because that might be your other question is, but the question is, are we paying the real cost of the things that we have today? Are we paying we are not paying the real cost. The moment we pay,
exactly.
Yeah, if we are paying the real cost, the things that I propose that are created in this utopia, you could say it, because it's a kind of utopian laboratory, are probably viable in the market because they take the third costs in account and the other ones, the true costs in account.
For sure, we are not paying the right costs, because until we have huge taxes on transport over the sea and over the air of goods and materials, we are not paying. And of course, the scarcity and the mining issues. So I think we should be really looking at with the different currency. I have some other questions, but let's go to the students. Maybe Jakob, you could moderate that.
Can I have a question, Tina?
Oh, Alyosha.
Oh my God.
See you from another room.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hi, Jan. It was an absolute pleasure to see your overview of the research and work that you're doing in Atelier LUMA. So it's absolutely fantastic to have it in such a compressed way. Super interesting. And I really appreciate how you do the research on the level of materials. But I am very much interested into the concept of what you do together with Assemble and the BC architects relating to the building. And I'm having a question in relation, I mean, from an architectural point of view as an architect, because we deal with these things all the time. It's absolutely interesting how you said you treat the building as a quarry, as a material resource, with other words. And obviously that's kind of very natural to do when you interact within an existing building, but also in the larger setting of architecture, we have so many existing buildings and we are building new ones next door or maybe within the region or a city. So it's a very important topic to look at. And I'm interested in the relation to the concrete that you were also mentioning, that you have like positive thoughts towards that. And my question is, have you had, what kind of experience and research or thoughts you have got over concrete and recycling concrete? Because everybody can imagine how can a brick be recycled. But concrete is something which has a little bit different properties than brick. And it needs different energies, I would imagine, in order to recycle or use it. So what are your thoughts on that as a research team?
Yeah, it's a big question because it's a big subject. First of all, maybe the collaboration Assemble BC and Atelier LUMA. What you have to know is that we broke the traditional contract architect material developer and so on. So we are in a different constellation together. It's where we take all the responsibility to do this and to do this together. So that is quite a different approach, where you know that an architect says, yeah, but this is the supplier, it's responsibility. or the contractor. It's says that's the architect, it's responsibility. Here we are in a different constellation. So that is the first thing that is very important. So the contracts between the parties are fundamentally different. Let's say the society of responsibility that is dominating the architecture world, and I think also killing the architecture world, is we try to shift that. There is a need for different contracts in the future, for sure. Where the responsibility is shared, and it's more a collaborative mode than just giving each other plans or sending lists to each other what needs to be done. So it will be, it's a different thing. Secondly, the material itself, concrete. The real specialist is Guillaume Habert of the ETH in Zurich. He is a very interesting researcher. He's director of sustainability, if I'm not wrong, of ETH in Zurich. And he can, for sure, going much more in detail about this. But what can I say? First of all, the production of concrete is done currently completely wrong. Yeah, but there are ways to do it better, and not only by using green energy and so on. Also, the processes need to be optimized. Yeah, probably it is also too cheap, like too many materials, so we don't calculate. There, the responsibility is coming in. That means like we make the pillars and the columns as thick as possible, because we don't want to be responsible as architects. And on top of that, we have a percentage. So we make them thicker. The thicker it is, the better for us all. Yeah, but that's of course not true. That is on longer term, you see that maybe architects need to have a kind of fixed wage. Maybe they are again public servants and they are doing that for the common good. So it's quite, if you go on with this, it's quite disruptive in a kind of way we could work together. What to say about the concrete? Concrete can be recycled. It's not that difficult as such. So you can do it on the construction sites itself. You can deconstruct the building and use it as again as a source. You press it, you make but it's where you use it again. It depends where you use it. If you use it like you saw in the building of Atelier LUMA, it's for the inside. It's not for the outside. We are using the rammed earth, which is rumble, that is pressed inside. You always have to cover it. It cannot be in direct contact with rain. It can be, but then you have to have bigger roofs over it, and so on and so on. So it's a new material, and it's not a new material. It's a material where you have to, just like other materials, you have to use it appropriate. We made also miscalculation. Sometimes you're also naive. This is an old industrial building that is renovated, as you saw. What we discovered, we calculated properly. A part of the soil was polluted. It was polluted. So there, our nice plan was to say, the whole building will be made with the building itself, was like impossible. We had to give in. Yeah. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Thank you. We are currently developing a project of a science center, and we are trying to use as much of recycled concrete. But of course, we are developing a couple of options where to use it, but for structural reasons, it's very, very hard, because if you really use it for structural reasons, the structural engineer needs to we need to standardize it, and he needs to have a standardized form that he can calculate with that further. So it's really different if you use it for cladding or if you use it for something to be hauled there.
Yeah,
but
that is that's another problem, is that the structural engineer wants to have one standard, and he takes the best quality for the whole building, and so you're out. So
Exactly.
and the question is, do you need everywhere the best quality? No, probably not.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. So there are different levels. Thank you. Let's go to the questions now. Lucas, maybe?
Well, let's start. Sorry to interrupt. Let's start with Denisa because she's been the first one.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I'm very interested in this topic, and I can't help but wonder if you have, aside from your website, some sort of compilation of all these materials that you have developed, or something as such that we can publicly access. So, you know, as students, we can already start thinking of how we can integrate this sort of materials into our designs. Because I think it's something that it's proper to think about when you're in your architectural education already, instead of just designing with concrete blocks or bricks or whatever.
Yeah. We have a catalog of more than 50 materials that can be used. It's a PDF that is continuously updated with all, which is a traditional catalog of material. We are I'm happy to share it with Jakob or others here. You can circulate it, but we won't sell these materials. We are interested in working together with architects, developers that want to invite us for working 2-3 years on a site, and to look what we can source there, and see how we can build the building with the materials around. Also, due to globalization, you can find many things, especially in Europe. Again, sunflowers on many places. Certain crops are everywhere. Algae are literally everywhere. So you can start thinking about all these. Salt can be found from Slovenia to in the mountains. So you can find it everywhere. Yeah, you can have that, but you cannot, it's not off the shelf. It's not that we have a storage full of materials. We only can say what you can cook in a certain place, in a certain environment. And for every place, it will be different. But that is like, if you look back to the history of building and certain vernacular architecture, that is where it came from, and that's where it is. We are not doing something different than probably 100 years ago. So there we are, but we try to combine it with, we don't try to do that in a nostalgic way. We try to do that in a contemporary way. We try to do that with the building industry of today, with the technologies of today, with the know-how that we have, and so on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next one from Lucas.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the lecture. I'm not quite sure if I get it with this Atelier LUMA. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what is behind this LUMA Foundation, and I'm very interested in your ideas about new collaborations or constellations. Maybe the Atelier LUMA is also something like this, I don't know. And the third thing is like, for me it sounds so much that the universities, I mean, you also are at a university that there this whole research should be like growing in this direction. And yeah, what are the new relations between firms, university? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's very clear. I think it's very clear. I will start with, first of all, what is LUMA Foundation? LUMA Foundation is an initiative of Maya Hoffman. She is one of the heirs of Roche, which is one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in Europe, in the world. The family was founder of one of the co-founders, for instance, of WWF. Yes. And they are really interested in they're interested in two things: environmental issues, and on the other side, contemporary art. They have a huge collection of art since I think now for a century. I don't go into detail about that, but LUMA Foundation in Arles is mainly exhibition spaces and contemporary art. We are one part of it. And in the Camargue, there is a research center of scientists, biologists that are working in wetlands that is also founded by the family Hoffmann. So why do they do that? Because wetlands are one of the biotopes, the ecosystems that are the most biodiverse. And people tend to drain these grounds continuously, but there are enormous amounts of insects, birds, plants, fishes, and so on and so on. And they are seen also as non-productive, but they are in fact very productive for Earth, for life on Earth in itself. So that's why they try to protect them, not only there, but around the world. In fact, in the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, the first international nature accord, like in the tradition of the climate accords, was made, and it's the Ramsar Convention, which is trying to connect all kind of wetlands around the world to protect them. If you look into wetlands, and now another layer comes up, most of the time communities are living there, like in the Camargue, gypsies are living there, but in other lands, in other countries, other communities that have it very heavy, that are like living on the cheap grounds, are living there and trying to live and develop all kind of crafts to maintain the land in itself. So this is what a bit the background of LUMA Foundation. One of the programs that is installed since 2016 is Atelier LUMA. Yeah, so this was done after 2014. The groundbreaking works of this building started, but they realized that what they were doing, in fact, now it seems to be evident that that was not maybe the full right choice. So in 2018, when it became clear that some of the results of Atelier LUMA might have some impact, they stopped the works for approximately 1 year. You have to imagine stopping a construction site is an enormous cost. Tina and Alosha will know that, and then restart a construction site with new inside, new interiors, fighting against Frank Gehry, that normally is doing everywhere in the whole world the same interiors. So that was a big fight, and there we played a crucial role to change that kind of environment. We cannot, it's a drop on a hot plate, I can say, but at least it's a showcase. It's a place where we can bring people to and say, look, it's really possible. if you want to do it. You can have a public building because the building is public. It's a free entrance. You can come in and you can see art, but you also see all kind of materials that are not used in other places. And maybe we can also do it in the place on Earth where you are coming from. So that's a bit the motivation to do it. Why is this not happening in universities? Because much of the research is funded not only by the government, but also driven by the industry. And the government is even asking for market output. Universities have to prove that they are relying to a certain market. And that's, of course, negative because that is only conformistic. And therefore, it won't come out of the universities. Real innovation is not coming from there always. And we have the chance to work in an environment where, for instance, categorization is not of materials, like you have the traditional categorizations, is not important. We just put everything next to each other. In a university, everything is categorized, as you can see, as you experience. And the question is if that is the right way, if things should not be mixed up and should not be shaken and questioned again. So that's my answer to your question. If that is a bit an answer, Lucas, more or less.
Thanks for that. We have 3 more questions, so let's try to conclude with these. So the first one from Rick.
Yes, I was asking myself if there's, maybe for you personally or for the organization, is there any future goals for projects to produce a certain, or to develop a certain product, or to work with a certain material, or to replace a material or a product? Or is like the research process, is that more like looking at a material and its properties and to see what you can do with it? Yeah.
Good. Yeah, interesting question. We are indeed interested in spin-offs. We are looking sometimes for investors where we stay part of that process. We are setting up cooperatives in other regions to stay member of that organization and to build by that networks. So we want that Atelier LUMA is multiplied, is going further. And we are not doing that ourselves. Other people need to do that. But we instigate that process and we try to stay part of that process.
Thank you. Next question by Georgie, and we'll end with a question from Johannes Beintner.
Hi. So my question will be according to sharing this knowledge, what you mentioned, and you mentioned that you are willing to give the workshops, and you're giving the workshops and etc. But my question will be more: do you see that knowledge sharing in a bigger picture? Like, for example, a platform which reaches more the countries, which crosses more the borders, because nowadays situation showed us it's not possible to travel all along. And specific, my question will be the experience you did by setting up the cooperatives or the legal issues to fulfill the requirements of by doing this research. Are you willing, or are you imagining that this information can be shared as well, like going in an open space where even not only from your side kind of will put it this information, but there will be some exchange for other parts, like we all know Assemble, and they have this very funny videos producing different materials, and then they are showing and sharing that. So do you see Atelier LUMA in this kind of picture?
I don't know if we ever will be funny, but what I hope is that this resource center is a place where we can share. Yeah. So this is something, this is the online platform where we physically, not physically, but digitally built this network, and where the platforms and everything can, where everyone can exchange. I hope that is possible. That's my dream. I hope we can get there. I'm not sure if that is possible. I think so. That's what I hope. We are working with open software. We try to relate to open science movement. We patent though also several things. We make patents also, and we are quite strict in that. Maybe that is also important to say. In order to show sometimes also the value of things. And to say, look, we want to share it, but there are conditions. You just cannot share, replicate it, because if we would have algae everywhere around the world, you create also a disaster if everybody starts to create like this monoculture. So we need to be very careful with the solutions that we have. Yeah, the problem is in the fact that the world created the solutions, and by, it's not that the solution is the problem, it's the scale of the solutions that are the problem. That creates monoculture. And therefore what we are doing, we need to be very careful. So we need to exchange the principles and not just the materials as such.
Just for, I think, a comment, I think this is very important because everything is so fragile. But since you mentioned rammed earth, I think Martin Rauch has been dealing exactly in this direction. You know? He has been sharing his knowledge extraordinary. He taught so many people of the techniques and of the feedbacks that he was using, but he's always, whenever he speaks about it, he wants to outline that we have to be very careful also in rammed earth and understanding the local lame or the conditions. So I think we are slowly getting there, that there is this kind of openness, but we need to somehow control it, because out of scale it can be more damaging than it seems in the first goal.
Yeah, that's also why we do all these courses and workshops to pass on this information, and hope that we infect many people with our ideas indeed.
Yeah, for sure you are.
Okay, final question from Johannes.
So I wanted to ask about the direct site of Atelier LUMA, because we had this lecture by Bas Metz about this project, and how your work and his work somehow intersected each other, because I think there's a lot to be learned from each other, I guess, in the sense of the project.
Yeah, I think good remark. I think Bas's approach, where he brings in the landscape in an industrial site, which was a desert, in fact, is literally what Atelier LUMA is doing. He's bringing the different regions in, and you can see all the plants and all the things around, literally on the site itself. This is the first thing. So it's there. You can smell it, you can feel it, you can experience it, because his his design also reduced, is also creating a microclimate. The stone, the wall, the routing, the pavement was also developed together with Bas Metz, and we worked together there on this. We needed his expertise on how the roots of plants are going through, how water is going in, and so on. So at that moment, we always work together with the people, not that are around, but that are interested and want to exchange these ideas. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a final question?
Yes.
Good. I have a question about collaboration. I think it was really important to talk about, in particular, the collaboration between BC Architects and Assemble and with Atelier LUMA, and how that constitutes, or it almost demanded, a new type of contract of how you work together. I think it was also interesting maybe to point out that Assemble in BC collaborated on a residency basis also. So they came for a longer period of time, over several periods, to really immerse themselves into the area before doing anything. So I think it's a super interesting, important approach. So I think it also, you create this kind of common ground for these type of collaborations, in particular when it comes for designers and architects and artists coming in that are used to that already, are used to experimental collaborative processes. But I'm wondering, since now Atelier LUMA has been present since 2016, or effectively 2017, how has the collaboration been with locals, so local stakeholders that have been an intrinsic part of the projects? What has been, in fact, the impact on those networks? I mean, you mentioned that they've gained new or alternative income streams with turning waste from something that there's no value to having some value, but have them been other offsprings and so on.
Yeah, I'm gonna give some very small examples, but that makes it very tangible. I don't have a big calculation about this. I don't have, but what is clear is that we have we built it an enormous network. If I would say 2016, 10 people were there, were connected to Atelier LUMA. We asked everybody who came, every designer, every architect, every researcher, to work together with somebody else of the region itself. So everybody was coming internationally, had to work. Remember Bio 50, also there, that was a principle. You needed to work together with somebody that came from somewhere else. So there we really have a huge mapping of these networks that makes a resilient region. It's like a permaculture. If you have connectivity and you have diversity, then you create a resilient environment. So this is one of the basic principles. I'm going to give now some of very simple examples. One of the guys who came, and we didn't know at that moment, to the courses that we did with BC and Assemble, Tonzi, he's now, he was dealing with concrete in a traditional way, concrete guy, and he is now setting up together with the people he met at the courses, a kind of subdivision in his company as a constructor to develop with rumble earth and making bricks. And he started. So you see, you influence an environment by doing that, and that is the most sustainable impact. We can only give it and put it there, and now he will become a constructor, and he will become our constructor of, and he will start in January building. So that's fantastic. We never thought that he was the one who would do it. We were looking to completely other alternatives, but he saw it, and he's really entrepreneurial, and there you see things can change, you can shift, you can make shifts. So I really believe in that. Yeah,
I think that's a great conclusion, I think, of today's evening. I think I really like this kind of focus on pragmatism and of reality, like this kind of spin-off of this particular story with this concrete guy, because what we experience is, as architects in practice, is that of course we have to research and we have to find new sources and new processes, but we need to find ways how they would make to the construction site if we want to propose this critical future or anything that makes sense in the future. So yeah, thank you, Jan, again for extended discussion. I think it's really important to share this. Obviously, the platform of young future architects, it's a good one. I think you really inspired a lot. And then I think there will be more demand to understand how your know-how can be shared or learned from, and then basically planting additional seeds in some other projects or opening up new collaboration, which of course makes another step or kind of several steps into the right future. So thank you, Jan, so much for your time and efforts.
My pleasure, everybody here, and especially Tina and Jakob. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon all in real again, because Vienna is not easy, I think, at this moment.
No, it's not. So see you soon or in another collaboration. So we'll reach out. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye-bye. Ciao. Bye. Ciao.